Hello everyone, this is BritSimon. So I wanted to try and create a video for you for DV 2023 folks, because many of you would have found out in the last few days that you've been selected in the DV 2023 lottery, and congratulations. Some of you will have figured out already that your case number is extremely important in the process. And if you watched my previous video, sort of welcoming you as new winners, you may have heard me refer to that. And I think we need to talk about case numbers and explain some of the things around case numbers. Okay, so I've created videos before on how the draw process works. I've been doing this since 2013, so I know intimately how the process works in terms of the draw and all sorts of things, but we forget that every year we have new people joining in the process, and you won't necessarily know yet, right? So there are some things that I want to explain that will just make you understand it a little bit better. You know, where your case number is important, why it's important, where, you know, and try and answer some of the questions I'm getting, which I'm getting quite a few questions at the moment of, here's my case number, is it safe, is it, you know, when am I going to be interviewed, you know, is it a good number, is it a bad number, blah blah blah, right? All these sort of questions. So I want to try and answer those, but there's information we don't have at the moment, so I'm also going to explain when we're going to have that information. Okay, so let me just talk about case numbers in the beginning, right? And explain very briefly that, like I've said, there is a video I've created and a number of articles I've created which explains the draw process. But there is let's say you've got an Oceania case number of 1,000. You may be thinking there's 999 cases in front of you. There actually isn't 999 cases in front of case number 1,000. And so, you know, although case numbers are important, they're not ordered in the way, or they're not, they don't behave quite the way you expect them to, shall we say. So there are some things we know about this year, DV 2023, and there's some things we don't know, right? I'm already seeing some quite high case numbers being reported. For example, in Oceania, the region I just mentioned, somebody has told me they've got a case number of 3,000. That's very high. But what does that mean? What does it mean to have a high case number? And in Asia, I've heard some high case numbers. I've heard the same in Europe. In Africa, I haven't heard any really high case numbers yet, which is interesting to me. But over time, we're going to get a little bit more information about case numbers. And so what does it all mean? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain a little bit about the process using Oceania as an example, because it's one of the easiest regions to understand. Okay, so I'm going to show my screen. Let me add this screen into the page. Right, so we're able to extract the data from the government system. We can't get at it yet. We don't have access to the DV 2023 data yet. In most years, well, I say in most years, every year up to now, we've only had access to that data from January the 1st onwards in that year. So we may not get this data, the data I'm about to show you for previous years. We may not get that data until January the 1st. If they haven't made some system changes that I was hoping they were going to make, we won't have that data for a while. But this data is official data extracted from the official system, but in an unofficial way. And so it's the real data. You can trust this data. It is the real status data on all of the cases. And we've been extracting this data for a number of years. There are a number of people who are doing it this year. And there are some people who've developed these very smart ways of getting the data from a system called SEAC, which is number one, the place where you go to fill in your DS260, but also there's a case status area. And from the case status database, we're able to get all sorts of information, which is really useful to see how many cases have been selected and what the case numbers are and that sort of thing. But we don't have full access to that data yet for DV 2023. So I'm going to show you now this data from 2018. I'm going to talk about this data for Oceania. So this is a representation of data previously extracted in a previous year. And I'm going to use DV 2018 as an example, and then I'm going to explain DV 2020 and what changed. Okay, so this representation shows out of 100, each of the case statuses for each case number. So, for example, in the first block of numbers here, there were 100 cases in the first 100 numbers, right? The little section at the top is in blue, is what I call holes. Okay, I'll come back to that in a minute. And the other cases are either in a ready status, or they've been issued, or they've been refused, or they're at NVC. When we eventually see the DV 2023 data, understand every case starts at an initial starting point of at NVC. It means nothing. It's like being on Go on the Monopoly board, on the very first stage. It means nothing. The status won't actually change until KCC schedule the case, right? But what's important is that you can see from Oceania that there was around about 90% of all the case numbers throughout the whole range up to about 2,500. About 90% of the cases were real cases. They actually had a case, and about something less than 10% is in this blue color, which means it's a hole. What's a hole? Well, as the draw is happening, they select all of the people they want to select. And they might select, let's say, 100 cases in Oceania. And out of those 100 cases, there's then going to be some sort of processing, which will disqualify some of those cases. And those cases that get disqualified, even before the results are announced, are called holes, right? So you might see case number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4 is missing, right? And then you've got number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, and number 9 is missing, right? Those are holes in the process. And that's what I meant earlier by saying at case number 1000, you may not have 999 cases in front of you, right? Now, let's come back to our friend who reported to me that he's got a case number of Oceania 3000 and something. Has he got 2,999 cases in front of him? No. And the reason I know that is because I know there will be some holes. I don't know how many holes there will be yet, because it changes in each year. And it changes based on how they disqualify cases during that processing period that is after the draw takes place, but before the draw results are announced, right? So if you've got a case number, don't worry, you're not a hole, you're a real case number. You're not about to become a hole. The holes basically would have seen you have not been selected. They had no idea that they were actually numbered in a low enough number to be selected, but got disqualified for some reason during the whole lottery draw process. The reasons they get disqualified, by the way, is because they've put in multiple entries, or they've put something really stupid on their form. Their form is invalid. They've uploaded a picture of a donkey's butt rather than their own, photo. It would be silly things like that. So there are a number of pretty obvious ways to get disqualified from the entry process. And so if you've got a case number, you've already been through that screening process, so you don't need to worry about that. And please don't freak out because your photo dimensions were, not right or whatever. As I mentioned, if you've gone through the draw process and you've got a case number, then they've already done that screening process. Okay, so back to our friend with case number 3000 in Oceania. He has got some number of holes in front of him in terms of the case number. He is case number 3000, but he's got some number less than that in front of him. Now, in DV 2018, you can see there are about 10% of holes. And by looking at this data, I could look at another year. And for example, in DV 2017, you can see there was also about 10% of holes. Then in DV 2020, something quite dramatic happened, and I'll show you the data there. This is the same region, it's Oceania again, But you can see how many more cases there are in this blue color, and those cases are holes. So between 2019 and 2020, a new procedure was introduced that caused some reason for many, many more of these cases to be knocked out and disqualified after the initial selection and before the results were announced. And so Oceania, in 2020, had a holes rate of about 60%, right? Now, that changed again in DV 2021. It didn't go really high, but you can see that the holes rate in DV 2021 was a little bit less high, a little bit lower. They were about 50% roughly of cases were holes in Oceania. And then if we look at DV 2022 and we look at Oceania, we can see that it was around about 50% or so, roughly speaking. I'm just eyeballing that, right? It's about 50% in DV 2022 as well, holes, right? So for our friend in case number 3000 and something, 3000, let's just say is case number 3000. He may have 50 or 60% of the case numbers before him as being holes. I don't know yet. We don't have that data yet for DV 2023. So I can only guess. But I think it's going to be at least 50%, perhaps 60%. And that really depends what technology and what procedures they're using in order to disqualify cases and create the holes, right? We know that they look at the basic data in the form. We know that they look at the photo, for example. They compare the photos to previous year's entries. They compare the data to previous year's entries. They're looking for multiple applications, and they're disqualifying those cases, right? So there's some basics. Now, they're not disqualifying people that chose a low level of education or that are married rather than single or anything like that. So please, let's not create sort of, conspiracy theories about that. They're looking for people who've broken the rules, right? And so I'm not worried about the people that got disqualified, about the holes that have been created, because all of those cases have been screened out because they broke the rules in some way, right? So our friend at case number 3000, and I've forgotten the gentleman's name, but it was someone on my blog reported that case, so I'm speaking directly to that guy. But I'm using Oceania as a proxy for all of the regions because they behave in similar ways. And so we don't know how many holes there are yet. Now I've got a few bits of evidence I'm hearing from people around the world. And I've heard, for example, someone has got a case number 18,000 in Nepal. That could be a mistake. It could be a misreported country. But if it's true, that's the highest I've heard of Nepal going to for quite some time. And that would indicate to me that there are, either a lot more selectees than a typical year, and that they've let the selectee numbers go high, perhaps just high in Nepal, I don't know. But Nepal normally has a lower maximum case number. I've explained why in other videos. Don't focus on that right now. But that's one piece of evidence I've got. I've also heard from people who have got EU 36,000 case numbers, for example. That's relatively high. So as I say, one of two things has happened. Either we have a high selectee year, where they've selected a lot more people than even last year. And last year they selected 119,000 people, which is too many. So either we have a high number of selectees, or we have a reasonable number of selectees, which should be around about 100,000 or so. But we've got a lot more holes than a typical year for some new technology, for some new reason they've got to disqualify cases, right? Now, we're not going to know the answer to that for some time. In a few weeks' time, we'll see the publication of new visa bulletins, and probably in the either July or the August visa bulletins, which are published in June and July, right? The visa bulletins are called let's say the August visa bulletin. The August visa bulletin will be the first one that concerns DV 2023. It'll have the case numbers that are being released for October interviews, right? So is that right? No, it'll be released in August, it'll be called September, and it will have the October interviews in it, right? So the naming convention of the visa bulletin and the release date of the visa bulletin is a bit confusing. But it's released in month A, it's called month B, and it concerns month C, right? In every month. So July's visa bulletin will be, the visa bulletin that's released in July will be called the August visa bulletin, and it concerns September of 2022, meaning it's the last visa bulletin for DV 2022. The next visa bulletin will be released in August. It's called the September visa bulletin, and it concerns October of 2022, which is DV 2023. That's how it works, right? Okay, so now you know how the visa bulletin works a little bit, and you know that we'll find out some information in one of those near-term visa bulletins. In DV 2022, we always refer back to the August visa bulletin from the previous year, which actually gave us the numbers as early as July of 2020 for 2021 for DV 2022 cases. Bit confusing, but in fact, I'll just show you that. And here's what we'll see. So if I type in visa bulletin, I go to the visa bulletin here. The visa bulletin can be seen at any time, obviously. My website this morning. Okay, so I can go to the previous year, and I can go fiscal year 2021. Look at the visa bulletin that is called August. This one would have been released in July. And at the bottom of this visa bulletin, which is a normal visa bulletin, it has a listing of all the winners by country, and we can go in there and we can see how many people were selected in each country and within the regions. These numbers here relate to main winners, principal selectees, and their family members. So where it says Algeria 6001, that would be something like 3,000 cases, and which is the cases plus the spouse and the kids on those cases, right? Or for single people, it would have been that. So, so this is where we turn to. Now we're going to have that data, I hope, for DV 2023. I hope we'll have that data in July. It might be later than that. So we're May now, so it's going to take us almost 2 months before we have this information, right? That will tell us how many people are selected. In some previous years, in the congratulations, you have been selected letter, it actually gave the number of selectees, and it's sometimes also published in the you'll see it published in the results here. So for example, it says here's the results for DV 2022. Again, this was like a year and a half ago, and that talks about the number of entries, the number of selectees. It says, approximately 119,021 applicants have been registered. So it tells you a little bit of information, and then it gives you the detail by country. Okay, so that's obviously very important. The other thing that we expect is the SEAC data, as I mentioned earlier, which we can only extract probably in January 1st of next year. That's when we truly confirm how many, what's the maximum case number in each region. And so knowing the maximum case number, the number of people per region, etc., unfortunately, that information builds up over time. So right now, I can't give you a straight answer about, if you ask me, EU 27,000, is that a good case number or bad? Well, I don't know. I don't know how many people are selected in this year's lottery. I don't know the maximum number that it goes to. And the only information I can get between now and the next few weeks is the information you report to me about what your case numbers are. And from there, I'll make a note of the highest case numbers that I hear about. But it's not 100% reliable information. We're building a picture slowly, okay? Okay, so let's go back to this data, and I want to show you a little bit more information on this data. Actually, let me just go back to DV 2018. We'll go to Oceania again. This website, by the way, a kind guy, very smart guy called Zarthisius, goes by the name of Zarthisius, has created this website. And as you can see, he's gathered on there all the SEAC data from 2013 through to 2022. This is an awesome resource. We have data currently being extracted for DV 2022 by Zarthisius and by others as well. And they're presenting all this information. So we have a lot of data, which really helps us understand the information. And this 2013, 2014 data was recently made available, although I've been getting the SEAC data myself since 2014, I think it is. So anyway, there's a lot of data that's in there. Now, let's talk about a little bit more information in this. And again, this is going to help explain what happens in a typical year. DV 2018 was sort of a typical year. I'm going to show you on my website, on my blog, I have a link that comes to this place. I've got Visa Bulletin numbers. And for a few years, I've been saving the Visa Bulletin progress year by year, and I produce it so that you can all see it on this spreadsheet. Okay, but I've opened the spreadsheet here because it's a little bit easier to see. But you can go and see this spreadsheet. You can go and look at this data. And I've got data going all the way back to the beginning of the program, basically 2003. It's not actually the beginning, but the earliest I could find from the Visa Bulletin. So I've tracked all of the numbers. And then for a few years, since 2014, I've also got the number of selectees in any given year and the number of selectees in a region. So right now I'm looking at Oceania. There's South America numbers are in there, Asia numbers are in there, etc., Africa and Europe. Okay, so you can come and have a look at this data. Go through my blog, BritSimonSays.com, and click the historical Visa Bulletin numbers link, and you can have a look at this data. But I'm using Oceania to explain some concepts because it's one of the simpler regions, and then I'm going to explain some differences in a couple of the regions. So in 2018, you can see that there were 3,863 people selected. So if we look at that data, the 3,863 people are all in those cases, and they had case numbers up to about case number 2,500, roughly speaking. It finished just a little bit before then. And you can see what happened. The case number was cut off. If I go back to the spreadsheet here, there was a cutoff in this particular year, 2018. The final number that was made current was 1450 for Oceania, right? So you can see the progress through the year, through the months, and it got to a point of 1450 as being the highest case number that could be processed, right? So you can see what actually happened by these colors. You can see all the colors, the issued cases, the refused cases, etc. But between 1,400 and 1,500, obviously at 1,450, the number of cases that could be processed, dropped significantly, and that's because of that cutoff, right? All of the cases above that number, 1,450, didn't get an interview. They didn't get a chance. They were not able to process. But below that case number, any case could process, right? Now you can see, why is there still a lot of cases in this beige area which says at NVC? One of the principles you need to understand is, even if you're case number 3,000, and even if there's 1,500 cases in front of you, not everybody is going to proceed with their case. There are people that never respond. I call them non-responses. They never respond. They won the lottery, and either they forget to check that they were a winner, or they check they're a winner and they think, you know what, I'm not going to bother going through that process. I don't want to move to America now, right? So that happens. We have in every year and in every region, there is a number of people that don't go through the process. Some people go through the process, but they fail to send in their DS-260 accurately, or perhaps they don't send in their documents, and they never get scheduled either, right? So there's a bunch of people here in this particular year, DV 2018, that never got scheduled for whatever reason. But that means that again, back to our case number 3000 guy, has got maybe 1,500 cases in front of him, but maybe only 700 of those cases even want to proceed, right? Maybe 1,000 cases. I don't know the number. That varies year to year, but not every case will want to proceed. And then of the cases that do proceed and even go to interviews, some will be refused, right? About 10% of people will be refused. Some people will be scheduled for an interview, but they'll never show up for their interviews, so they're no-shows. So there are lots of reasons, if you like, that that some cases just won't proceed. And which one's the ready color? Yeah, this green section here are cases that finished the year at ready status, meaning they didn't turn up. The sort of reddish color here is refused. So they went for an interview, but they got refused at the interview. And so you can see that there's a percentage around about 6 or 8% of those in Oceania in that year, and it varies year to year. So you can begin to see the trends here, right? So your case number is relative to how many people are true cases in front of you, relative to how many of them apply, relative to how many of them actually get processed and issued versus refused, okay? So that means it's not always easy for us to sort of mathematically say, yeah, this number is safe and this next number is not safe. We can't do that with reliable predictions. We can only make generic sort of predictions based on what we've seen in previous years, right? So that's the first thing I wanted you to understand. I want you to understand about those points. And if you are interested in knowing more about the draw process and why all these holes are created and how that all works, etc., by all means, watch the other video, and I'll link to it either above me talking or in the YouTube description below. Okay. All right, and then and bear in mind also that the number of holes, like I mentioned earlier, is going to vary year to year. The reason I use Oceania is because it's a pretty static region. There's a relatively small amount of selectees, but there's a static region because there is one more factor that in some countries, some regions rather, causes a difference in the number of holes per 1,000 cases, right? So if I look at DV 2018 again, this was a sort of pretty normal year, and I look at AS region, you can see that in Asia, again, there was something like a 90% holes rate, 85 or 90% holes rate for the first, few cases up to about case number 7,000, maybe 7,500, right? And at that point, there's a lot more holes. Why is that? Okay, well, in this particular region, Asia, there are 2 countries which are limited in the draw. Nepal, as I mentioned earlier, is one of those countries, and the other country is Iran. The reason those countries get limited during the draw is because they have so many entries in comparison to other countries within Asia that they very quickly get to the most number of selectees they could possibly have. And they during the draw, they just start saying, okay, here's another one from Nepal. We're not going to bother. Here's another one from Iran. They're too high. We're not going to bother, right? They just stop drawing those numbers, or they stop revealing those numbers as winners to entries. And that number varies every year. Iran and Nepal experience this. In DV 2022, both those countries cut off between 12,000 and 14,000, right? But it varies. It varies every year, depending on the number of entries and the relative number of entries between those 2 countries and the rest of Asia. The same thing happens in EU. In EU in 2018, you can see that there's a sort of reduction in cases that happened around about 11,000, and then a later reduction that happened about 36, 37,000, right? And again, these are specific countries that get cut off during the draw. There's probably another reduction actually midway about here. So probably about 3 reductions. So that relates to 3 or perhaps 4 countries in that year where the countries were cut off. And in 2018, 2 of those countries almost certainly were Ukraine and Uzbekistan. And again, those countries have such a high number of entries compared to the rest of Europe that they were cut off. It's different in later years, different in each year. The case number they get cut off at is different, and it depends on how many entries there are. And again, we don't know exactly this information until we get the SEAC data, and then we can sort of see what's gone on, right? But there is a reducing number of real cases as we go through the number ranges, and that phenomenon happens in Asia, Europe, and Africa. I'll show you Africa in 2018 as well. Same sort of thing here in Africa, right? This is all 2018 data, but it's showing you the principle. So unlike Oceania, where there's no cutoff country, where there's no country that has so many more winners than the other countries, or so many more entries than the other countries, there's no country that's cut off. The three bigger regions, Asia, Europe, and Africa, have these cutoffs. South America and Oceania don't have these cutoffs, right? Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means that if your case number is case number 27,000 in Europe, you actually, even if you knew the percentage of cases, you can't be absolutely precise about how many cases there are in front of you, because it depends where the cutoffs happen for those countries. So the picture will be slow to reveal for you in Europe, Asia, and Africa. In Oceania, as soon as I know how many selectees there are, I can say, okay, there's 3,000 selectees. Roughly speaking, there's, let's say, I'm just using a number here, but 1.5, just for round numbers, 1.5 people on every case. That would mean there's 2,000 cases and 1.5 people on each of the cases on average. That's why there's 3,000 selectees. So I would be expecting to see 2,000 cases. And if I know that the highest case number I've heard of is case number 3,000, then I could say, yep, there's going to be 1,000 holes between, up to case number 3,000. I could work it out and be fairly precise, not exact, but fairly precise about the number of cases. I just need to know how many selectees there are, how many derivatives there would be on average on each case in that region. I can kind of compute that. And then I can get to a number of cases, predicted cases. And if I know the max case number in Oceania, I can work out a pretty simple chart. In Africa, Europe, and Asia, the chart's going to be much more complicated than that. And so I'm not going to know quite the same level of information until I can get the extracted data in January, right? Okay, so hopefully, if you've kept up with what I've been saying, and we've been talking now for 30 odd minutes, so sorry about the time, but it's an important subject. So hopefully now you understand that you've got your case number. I can't tell you exactly how good or bad your case number is, but you do know that there's going to be some number of holes in front of you, and there's in front of you there's going to be some number of selectees which we don't know yet, right? So I'm not going to give anybody any predictions about how good or bad their case number is at the moment. It's too early. We don't have enough data. When we get that visa bulletin that gives us the per country numbers, we'll know a bit more, and we'll start to talk about what that really means. But if somebody tries to give you information, says, don't worry, I had case number 23,000 in 1978 or whatever, it's not that before that, but 2008, when people talk about that and they say that they know exactly what's going to happen because of what happened to them 10 years ago or their uncle or whatever, they're talking nonsense. Just ignore them. People just talk a lot of nonsense about this program without knowing what the hell they're talking about. And also, a lot of the people that are talking about DV right now have only experienced DV 2022, 21, or 2020. And those 3 years have all been terribly blighted and affected by all of the things that happened, the travel bans, the bans on immigrants from Trump, COVID, the embassy closures, etc. There's been a lot of difficult times with the lottery over the last 3 years, and a lot of people only have experience of those years And so they really only know that information. They don't know how the process is supposed to run in a normal year. And I'm hoping DV 2023 will be more of a normal year. Okay. A couple of other last points I want to make. I will come back and explain this this numbering thing again over the next few weeks, and as I get more information. I am aware, though, of a couple of other things that you should know about. Many of you are going into the DS260 system in SEAC, and you're trying to start your cases, and it's coming back with a sort of strange error message. That's because there are so many people logging into that system right now, trying to start their forms, and the system is overwhelmed. The servers are overwhelmed. Don't worry about that. You can try at a different time of day, perhaps that might help. But also within a few days, that will start to calm down and things will be a bit better. The other thing is, just make sure you subscribe to my channel, start listening to the information I'm giving. I will, in a few days' time, I'm going to publish another video, which will be about the document procedure. And, as I mentioned in my video the other day, first thing is you're going to have to do is your DS260 submission. Make sure you do that accurately. Make sure you're paying attention to what you've already done in your entry. Did you make a fatal mistake in your entry? How high is your case number, relatively speaking? You have a little bit of a clue. And that go through that process. And then in a few weeks or a few months' time, you may be asked for documents by KCC, or I may be telling you to submit those documents proactively. Either way, we'll talk about that over the next few weeks, but you won't really need that information right now. So I'm trying to, sort of get to the point of the right now information. Last point I want to make is some people think that whatever their case number, if they submit their DS260 really fast and they're really lucky, that maybe they can get interviewed earlier. And no, that's not the case. The case number affects everything in this process. So I heard from someone at case number EU 36,000, and they were saying, I'm going to rush and put in my DS260. And the reality is that case is a high case number, probably. They're going to wait until next year. And what we'll see is KCC are going to sort of chunk up, spread out the work over the full year. So no interviews will start until the 1st of October, and interviews will continue until the end of September in 2023. Over each of those 12 months, they want to do roughly about 1/12 of the work. It's not exactly like that. But what that means is if they wanted to get to case number 36,000 by September of 2023, they would sort of, and it's not exactly like this, but they would sort of release that region 3,000 case numbers at a time. So you might see October case numbers up to 3,000 would be published. Now, they might make the visa bulletin a bit higher than that or lower than that. It changes month to month. It's not a precise 1/12 every month. It's not like that. But you could roughly figure out that, by the end of, let's say, the first 3 months of processing, October, November, and December, they will have done about 15 to 20% of the case numbers. And then January, February, March, that would be another, let's say, 25% of the case numbers, roughly speaking, and so on. So as we go through the year, which means that there is a long wait for some of you, particularly if you've got relatively high case numbers. And high case numbers, let me just sort of go through the regions and tell you what high case numbers will be. Or let me just tell you actually the first quarter, so October, November, December. Here's what I expect to see in terms of case numbers that could be interviewed in those first 3 months. In Africa, we're probably talking about case numbers up to about 10,000, right? Roughly, in the first 3 months. So we might see the visa bulletin published at 5,000 in month 1 for October, and maybe it goes to 8,000 in month 2, and maybe it goes to 10,000 in month 3. Something like that, right? Not precise, just a rough sort of guesstimate of what's going to happen. In Europe, we'll probably see case numbers up to about 7,000 or 8,000 in the first 3 months, right? So again, October, November, December, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, but roughly like that. In Asia, we'll probably see case numbers about 3,000 to 4,000 in that first 3 months. In South America, maybe cases up to about, let's say, 700, 800, maybe as much as 1,000. And Oceania, probably around about 500 to, let's say, 700, roughly speaking, right, would be the target for the first 3 months. Now, a lot of this is going to depend how well KCC perform, what they do with the document processing, etc. And there's going to be various impacts of KCC. KCC have control over this process, and the ability of embassies to accept the interviews is an important topic right now for DV 2022. But for DV 2023, it's, to start with, it's about how quickly KCC process all of the DS-260s they're receiving and then documents, right? And so we don't know how many of their team members they're going to assign to DV 2023 work as opposed to completing DV 2022. So it's a little unsure at the moment how things will progress over the next few months. And the progression can affect the way the visa bulletin works as well. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I just want to make it clear that if your case number Africa 25,000 or something, you're not going to get an interview in October of this year. You're just not. It doesn't matter what you do, right? So by all means, submit your DS-260 early if you want, but you're still going to have a long wait later, okay? All right, so that's really what I wanted to cover today. Hopefully that's been helpful to you. Please do subscribe to my channel. Please make sure you've done that. You can ask me questions on my blog at BritSimonSays.com. You can also ask me questions on YouTube, but it's harder to keep track of the questions on YouTube. So BritSimonSays.com is the preferred method to ask me questions. I also have a Twitter account. I'm pretty vocal on Twitter, and you can find me there. I'll put the link below the video. And I answer questions in some channels and some forums, etc. But if I have to dedicate my time, the one place that I will do that, the two places I will do that mainly, is at my blog and at my YouTube channel. Okay, so if you really want to get hold of me, that's where you go, right? One of those two places, and preferably the blog. Okay, everybody, thanks for listening in today. I hope that was informative and helpful. And I'll talk to you again in a few days' time, and we'll talk about the document procedure and about how that goes. And then after that, I'll start addressing some of the things that you may be concerned about, some of the mistakes that you may have made, or how to go through processes such as adding a baby to the process, getting married, all of those things. We'll cover those things. I have got 200 odd videos that you can look at that address some of this that I've created in previous years. You're welcome to go have a look at that. I also have on my blog, I've been building this information since 2014. So there's a lot of information there, but I am intending to go through and recreate some of those videos and blog posts for you, so you'll have more up-to-date information. Okay. On my blog, by the way, at the moment has a couple of issues with my blog got attacked, and I got some sort of virus on there a few months ago, and I've not managed to spare the time to actually fix that. I did have one guy that was going to help me with that, and I didn't get back to him. But at some point I'm going to do that. The impact of that, unfortunately, is that Google's not searching my site properly at the moment, not presenting any answers from my site. But you can go to my site, BritSimonSays.com, and you can type in there. There's a magnifying glass symbol. You can click that and you can type in keyword searches, and you can find information that way. You can also Google my name, BritSimon, and any topic you want to discuss, and you'll probably get a YouTube video that addresses that point. So please look for information from me. Of course, there are other YouTube channels out there. Some of them are very, very prolific, shall we say, in the information they come out with. They come out with a lot of information. but very few of them are any good, frankly. So if you want good information, this is the place you find it. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for listening in. Bye-bye now.